All righty. All righty. So I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar of the year. My name is Aaron Dunn. I head up marketing here at CareAcademy. I'm really excited to bring to you, I guess, like I said, our first event of the year. And this we titled it an industry outlook for 2022. We have a great roster of folks today. We got a really large group of attendees. And we definitely we know it's a moment in time here, and we want to take advantage of that and help you and help all of us to acknowledge kind of where we're at. So we're going to get going. We'll cover a little bit of housekeeping items, but first of all, I'll just signal kind of who our panelists are today. We're going to get a formal introduction from them in a little bit, but in addition to myself. I'm being joined today by Qiana James, who's the CEO and founder of Friendly Faces Senior Care in Houston, and also Pete Morrissey, who is the owner of Right at Home in Gainesville, Georgia. Sometimes I want to put him in Jacksonville, Georgia, but no, it's Gainesville. And then also Howard Algeo, who is the Director of Business Development and Training for Seniors, helping seniors. So we'll get a little bit of a deeper introduction from them in a minute. But our agenda for today is we have a very short slide or two about CareAcademy for those of you who aren't familiar, and then we'll do some introductions, and we'll get right into the questions, and then obviously Q&A from everybody on this call. This webinar is being recorded, so have no fear if you want to come back to this later. We will send out the link later today to all those of you attended. We will also include the slide deck, although it's a fairly short slide deck, so there's not a lot here. As far as Q&A, there's really two ways to do it. There is the Q&A function within Zoom, which is super handy. But as happens in pandemic times, people also use the chat function. So feel free to use the chat function to put your questions in as well. And we will, some of the questions we'll be able to, I'm sure, answer during our time together, but we'll also try to respond in those channels as well. So a lot of different ways to do it, and I think we're all pros at how to do it now. So we'll get going. So just a quick word about who is CareAcademy for those of you who aren't familiar. CareAcademy is a training and compliance provider for home care agencies and home health agencies. We work with well over 1,000 agencies, both individual agencies, franchises, franchisees across the country to help you with your direct care worker training and curriculums. We provide a number of things. We have over 250 classes, over 100 video supports that we provide. And really it's designed for you, the home care agency administrator, to have at-a-glance insights about what's happening, how people are taking training. Are they taking training? Are they completing that training? As we know, that's the most important thing from a compliance perspective. So we actually also automate the compliance reporting for you. We're able to manage external training that you guys do, if there's in-person or other trainings. We are integrated with the leading home care agency management software providers, including WellSky, formerly ClearCare, get that right, AlayaCare, AccessCare, and others. And one of the things we'll talk a little bit more about is how some of our training is actually eligible for college credits. And it's important to note that our classes are delivered in a mobile-first environment. We don't require an app. You're actually able to access classes from any device, anywhere, anytime. To date, we've trained well over, I think now actually well over 250,000 direct care workers in the industry, and really helping you as agency administrators, with your recruiting, making sure that you are able to showcase training and get people from the recruit into the onboarding and out into the field. As I mentioned, training available anytime, anywhere, and our compliance program is designed in such a way to meet. We have a very large team that's focused on making sure that what we're providing you meets the compliance requirements in your state. I mentioned this earlier. Last year, we launched a really innovative program together with Southern New Hampshire University, where many of the trainings that your direct care workers are taking as part of their daily work are actually available for college credit today with Southern New Hampshire University, who is one of the leading providers of nurse credentialing in the country. And so we're really excited to bring this initiative forward and open up new upskilling pathways for your direct care workforce. And a recent survey that we did showcased the value of training and helping you leverage that training as part of your recruitment and retention strategies. SNHU is based in Manchester, New Hampshire. It's a lovely city, maybe not this time of year, but they are actually also fully enabled online. So if you're in California, you do not need to travel to New Hampshire, although it's very nice. So with that, I promised you a very short introduction to CareAcademy, so I'm going to move on from that. And let's just take a minute to introduce you to our panelists today. First up is Qiana, and I'll ask Qiana, why don't you just come off mute on camera and tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Qiana James, and I am the founder and CEO with Friendly Faces Senior Care. I am located in Houston, Texas. So, hey, y'all. And I started my agency in 2010, and we only do private pay in-home caregiver services for seniors. We do provide services for all of Houston and the surrounding communities. And as you can see from the slide, we have won a lot of awards, to which I am very, very proud. And I'm very happy to be here today on the panel with everybody.
Awesome. Excellent. Next up is Pete.
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's Pete Morrissey. And so I am, my wife and I are the owners of Right at Home in Gainesville, Georgia, so a northern suburb of Atlanta. The business is entering its 13th year, and we're entering our 3rd year of ownership. So we bought an existing business. My background is, working in large organizations, the U.S. military, Pfizer, IBM Life Sciences, was in academia for a short period of time. And so I think this is representative, maybe just my age, but also the ability to take some past experiences and apply them in this industry. And so we serve 3 constituencies. We have private pay clients. We service veterans, which I have probably a personal affinity for. And then there are 2 Medicaid programs in Georgia in which we're involved. So happy to be here today and participate with my colleagues.
Happy to have you. And remind me again, when did you buy the franchise?
Timing was incredibly bad in that we bought it about 3 months before the pandemic hit. So.
Yeah. Well, we're happy you're here. Yes. And still here. All right, Howard, welcome to the call.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you for having me on the panel. I'm Howard Algeo, Director of Business Development and Training for Seniors Helping Seniors. I'm coming to you from our home office in Reading, Pennsylvania, in southeastern PA. I've been doing this kind of work for over 35 years. Of course, it's wonderful because I get to help my family by helping other families. Seniors Helping Seniors has 120 franchise locations in 36 states, also in the United Kingdom and the Republic of Malta. My job is I'm in the front line of support and training for our franchise partners. And I look forward to our conversation today. Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, very important. Welcome to the call. Very important question. How often do you get to go to Malta?
Never. But yes. But I'm hopeful, Aaron. I'm hopeful.
All right. Well, maybe when the pandemic ends, question mark, we'll make a trip.
We'll see.
Someday I need to understand the story about how you're in Malta, but I'm sure there's a good one. So this is great, and so we're going to dive into the Q&A section here, and since we don't actually have prepared slides, we're going to go ahead and turn the slides off so you can see all of our smiling faces in full relief, for better or worse. So as a quick setup, I think I first want to acknowledge it's been a really hard 2 years. I mean, Pete, I was sort of joking with you about like the timing that you bought the franchise, and so as I said, that wasn't great timing, but it's hard to believe it's been 2 years. I sort of reflect on that periodically. I've sort of been keeping a running diary of sort of what's been happening. And sort of the naivete that we had back in March of 2020 about what might be happening. And I felt like I was aggressive, like, well, this is going to take us a couple months to sort out. Many of my friends were like, oh, a couple weeks, and I was like, and here we are, 2 years, and we're still in the mix of it. And hopefully we're moving past the Omicron surge. I mean, I'm up here in Massachusetts in the Northeast, and things are starting to maybe ease up a little bit. But I do think we're starting to think broadly in the industry about really looking ahead to what comes next. In talking with folks like you and talking with our panelists today, it sounds like more and more of you are starting to think about kind of how do you move past working in the business and this crisis and working now actually on the business. I don't want to say that COVID is routinized because new surge is just around the corner maybe, but it's part of the business now. It's not this external kind of black swan event that none of us could see coming. It's here. It's now. It's going to be with us for quite a while, unfortunately. So it's a really kind of a good time to take stock and see where we need to go this year, which gets us really into today's discussion. And I'm really grateful to each of you as a panelist for joining us, and also a big thank you to the audience for joining us. I know you have a lot on your plate. The beginning of the year is always chaotic, so thank you for taking your time. So let's dig in a little bit. We got a few questions for the panelists, and again, just a reminder: feel free to use the Q&A functionality to add questions, or the chat function. Either one is fine. We will monitor that as we go, and we'll take questions when we can. So, but one of the things that I'm curious about is as we move through pandemic phases 1, 2, and a lot of industries were forced to go fully remote. The day the things started to shut down in the pandemic, and quite a few have declared, that they're going to remain fully remote, and even as we move past the pandemic, or maybe they're doing some sort of a hybrid thing. And we'll leave aside our friends on Wall Street who are insistent that everybody's going to be back in an office in the high rise in downtown Manhattan, which will be interesting. But how does that idea of virtualization work here in the home care industry? I'd love to hear from you, and I'll sort of start, and I'll try to sort of guide us around the horn here. But maybe we can start with you, Pete. Have you attempted virtualization? Have you thought about kind of a hybrid world as we look ahead to the rest of this year and going beyond it?
Yeah, we have, and I think we're, as you shared, we're 2 years into this, and we are now dealing with the ebbs and flows of this pandemic, and won't be the last one. So I think what we've come to realize is this is our new normal, and so it is now. We've been thinking more, frankly, in the past year about how do we work on the business. So this concept of virtualization is one. I think we each are guided by our prior experiences. Mine, as it pertains here, is probably most heavily from my IBM experience and private equity. We're managing global teams, highly decentralized. You had to be reliant on systems to work and optimize things in a virtual environment. So I think home care historically has been very physical, if you will, physically centric, and having to go to a location. But we've looked at it from two perspectives: from a systems perspective and from a talent perspective, in terms of this virtualization strategy. So what do I mean by systems is, looking at tool sets in terms of communication. So we use a tool, if it's okay to talk about real tools, it's called Tiger Connect. Was developed for large hospital systems, allows for HIPAA compliant messaging of text, video, and data, which is fantastic. So that allows for 100% virtualization in terms of communication. We use WellSky or ClearCare for, which is a virtual platform. I'm a strong proponent of CareAcademy. Yes, it's being sponsored by CareAcademy, but in terms of virtualization, engagement with caregivers, ease of use has been fantastic. And then DocuSign. So all readily available off-the-shelf tools. That was one of my guiding principles. We're not going to go build anything. We're going to look at what the market can offer. And I think a more important component on this, Aaron, is the talent, is having, onboarding talent who's either accustomed to or willing to engage in a virtual environment, is facile to be in an office, feels comfortable working in a remote environment. And so as we have, gone through the ebbs and flows of the pandemic, as everyone has, we've been able to go from 100% physical, 100% virtual, and then a hybrid model. And I see the hybrid is where we're going to continue to operate, frankly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, and Qiana, I know you came at this a slightly different way. You don't have an office at all, do you?
No, yes and no.
Yes and no.
So I'm a big proponent of work from home, and I have been for a long time. And it's just, I guess, for personal reasons, because I hate being stuck in an office. I always have. So when I started my agency all the way back in 2010, I just automatically built it so it would be virtual. So when the pandemic came, it was like no stopping. We were already rolling.
Wow. So you got a leg up, maybe.
Yes, definitely.
I want to dig into that a little bit more, but let's hear from Howard as well. Like, what are you seeing across your network of franchisees? Are people dabbling with this, or are they like? What's your perspective?
Well, virtualization, I call it de-officing, happened during
Sure.
during the pandemic, and it was embraced by our franchise partners. I'll be honest with you, the level of enthusiasm varied, but I mean, people understood that it was necessary. And so a lot of the tools that have been mentioned, we also use.
Mhm.
More interesting, Aaron, I guess we opened over a dozen locations in the past year, and all those folks were trained virtually.
Mhm.
And just off the top of my head, I think only a couple of those new franchise partners have an office in their rollout plan for the first 2 years. So we're going to learn more about it, because we have essentially a whole generation of new locations that have started virtually and are likely to continue for some time. The idea of the technology is a little bit different for us in that we hire mostly older caregivers. So the adaptation to technology sometimes is a challenge, but seriously, everybody who has a grandchild knows how to use FaceTime and Zoom and those kinds of things. So I'm happy to say we've had a really good experience with this across the board.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like maybe a generation who wasn't used to using FaceTime and Zoom surely now is.
Absolutely.
I was thinking of my own parents, actually. So, if for folks who are listening, if you go this route, I mean, I know we're working all on razor thin margins, and looking for every places where we can optimize, profit and either reinvest that or take it out of the business, however you think about that. But, is there a margin opportunity here for agencies that they should be considering? Is this, Pete, are you going to reduce your square footage, cut down your real estate costs? Like where do you think you might save some money here?
Yeah, so I think we always look for what are the advantages. So one of the advantages right now is that, commercial real estate is a buying opportunity or renting, or, it's more to our advantage right now on the consumer side. So the short answer is yes, we have really advantageous pricing now. In fact, our landlords come back and said, Pete, I'll keep you at the same rate, you name the term. So I think that's just indicative that, yes, we do have pricing power on the buy side. And we certainly would be looking to reduce our footprint when we do turn, and because there are a lot of good alternatives in terms of, obtaining space on as a PRN basis. So the short answer is yes, we will not increase our footprint.
Yeah. So throw a whole flat. Where else, Qiana, do you think? I mean, maybe a little bit hard for you to assess if you didn't have a whole huge office infrastructure that you were trying to downsize or de-office, as Howard phrased it. Are there areas where you think that you've been able to maybe save some cost, or maybe take that money that you might have put into a square footage and done something else with it? And then there's a few questions coming up from the audience, which we're going to get to in a second, because I think they're
yeah, I'm trying not to answer that question.
Yeah, no, all good. Great.
Yeah, definitely just less overhead, and you can utilize that and put it back into the business. For me, I'm really passionate when it comes to marketing and branding.
Yeah.
So I tend to use a larger piece of my budget towards that area than probably a lot of people do.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to the question that you're most familiar with. That's come up, and a few people plus one did, which is, where the heck do you do interviews? How do you handle onboarding? How are you like doing that stuff that is, that has historically happened in an office? When you said about this, you obviously had to think about this more creatively, and so what have you been doing?
It actually did change after COVID. So before COVID, that was the only thing we couldn't do, because we were not using Zoom or video conference or anything like that. I remember thinking about Skype and whether or not I should use it. And I really didn't understand how to use Skype.
Yeah.
I know it sounds so ancient.
Right.
I didn't really know how to use it, so I never went there. But we've always had what's called Regis or Spaces. It's the same company, and they're virtual offices, and you can rent space by the hour. I've always had those, and that's where we use if we needed to do our orientations, our meeting with our caregivers. Occasionally, we might have to meet a client, but for the most part, meeting our employees, we would do it at the Regis, and we just rent it by the hour. Now, that is a good system. They're a nationwide, actually international company in most metropolitan areas. And like here in Houston, they have probably over 20 locations. So since we service all of Houston, we can just move around the city utilizing those Regis locations.
So
after COVID.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, keep going.
I was going to say after COVID, and we learned about Zoom, and I'm like, where have you been, Zoom, all my life? We started doing Zoom interviews, which are interesting because not everybody is very technically savvy. So, that has its own challenges, but we've been able to do our majority of our interviews. So now we just started going back maybe once or twice a week to doing some in-person interviews. But on a daily basis, we are doing interviews on Zoom, usually about twice a day. And then my trainer also does the orientations, like just like one of the gentlemen was saying, we use CareAcademy, which is very helpful because they can just use it on their phone. And we have a whole orientation packet and process and training that we set up several times a day, including the evening, sometimes at night. And we're able to do all of that by Zoom. And then when we need to do the in-person trainings, again, we'll either do them on site, sometimes at the client's house, if we're training specific to the client, or we can utilize our Regis locations.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So, Regis has been around a long time, but I expect, we're going to see more and more companies start catering to this idea of flexible offices. Maybe you don't need all that committed square footage that you had before, across all industries, not just ours. Howard, you mentioned that your new franchises that are coming online don't have an office in their business plan. So how are you seeing them sort of take advantage of sort of flexible working spaces, or are they doing it all over Zoom, or
flexible working spaces and also public places? Libraries are very welcoming for us to meet with people. A lot of local governments have meeting rooms that they're more than welcoming to us in the work that we do. We do have a number of folks who do an initial interview via Zoom or another tool. I think the real crucial part for us is when we do the onboarding, what we call the orientation. We tend to gather more than one caregiver to do that, and we have been trying very hard to do those in person. I think what we want to strive for is to use these wonderful tools of technology, but not to disconnect from presence and from the human voice, and being able to look someone in the eye and really look to see what our caregivers are going to see, and the people who receive the care are going to see. So if you want to use the term hybrid, that might fit, but somewhere along the line, we really do like to connect in person in the caregiver end.
Yeah, that was one of the questions actually that came in from the audience members. Like, hey, this is a people business at the end of the day, and you're taking a very great responsibility as agency owners to hire somebody who is going to be your face to your client, and you take that responsibility very seriously. I know. So how do you balance that? You mentioned sort of making sure you can kind of get eyes on people and sort of but maybe Qiana, you can talk a little bit about how it's been working for you. You mentioned sort of having that moment in the virtual office space, but how do you stay connected with folks? This is sort of another theme from one of the questions coming in here, is like, how do you stay connected with folks even though you don't have that central location that they can keep coming back to?
Yeah, and you have to. And for us being an independent agency, it does work really different, and it can be more challenging than a traditional like franchise office that is specifically right there in your territory. So usually if you're independent and you service the entire city, it's always going to be challenging when it comes to connecting. But we have a chat line, and so we communicate through chat with our caregivers and with the office. And then we do events and things like that to stay in touch. But we talk with them. I'm very accessible, even though I'm the owner. So I will step in or they can contact me. So we do things like that. But that is always a challenge for us as an independent agency servicing so many areas. And it's something that we're always looking at ways to improve.
Yeah, that's great. And for the next one of these, by the way, I'd like the pink hat, so we can all be wearing the pink hats. Thank you. I like it a lot. Well, Pete, your franchise location of Right at Home. So Qiana just mentioned being independent and some of the challenges there. What are some of the challenges or opportunities that come with being part of the Right at Home franchise or franchises generally, not specifically to Right at Home?
So certainly we're, I think, bound by the geography, as Qiana said is correct. We have a pretty large geography in Northeast Georgia, and then we have a lot of non-Right at Home territories that we expand into. So the geography is pretty large. So what have we done around, skills training, which we still require to be hands-on and maintain the face-to-face? As Howard said, the government has a lot of, the Department of Labor has offices that we can book and use. We've also built good relationships with 2 local technical colleges and 2 CNA schools. And so that's been fantastic in that we can ask the caregiver to meet us at the CNA school. They have all the requisite tools needed. So our RN goes there, our trainer, and then we try to get more than one caregiver. But now it just strengthens that bond and relationship. Some caregivers come in and say, wow, I didn't know the school was here. We have a tuition offset program. So it just helps build that connectivity a little bit more strongly right from inception. But to answer your question, we're looking to utilize those physical partners who are already in the territory and then go to them.
Got it. So I'm going to flip that around to the other side. Howard, what are you doing for your franchises?
Pardon?
What are you doing for your franchises to sort of help them through some of these issues?
We are in constant communication with our franchise partners, but believe me, they help me more than I can help them because they're always coming up with innovative ways to reach out to people, to connect with people, ideas of where we can meet folks and how we can help people through, in particular, bringing on qualifying training, new caregivers. So to me, I think we have we call it a community because it's a sense of community where people all working together in this enterprise, and we get together frequently to talk about just these issues. So the strength is really in partner to partner to find ways to deal with what's been happening. If I may, I also, Qiana and Pete both mentioned things I wanted to reiterate. I mean, there's these wonderful tools we have. Many of our franchise partners use WellSky. They have a great way to communicate with a lot of people in a hurry, text messages, all that sort of stuff. But having those tools, that doesn't mean that you have to use them each and every time, and that picking up the phone and talking to someone really can make a difference. We treat isolation in the homes of the people that we serve, right? They're alone, we help them. But in many ways, a caregiver also feels a bit isolated, disconnected. And so we have to make sure that that we're addressing that and that they not only know that, but that they feel it.
Yeah, that's great. And I've let one eye on the chat here. What a fascinating chat thing happening here. And Qiana's like jumping in there and answering. Great. And we'll try to bring some of those forward so everybody who's not paying attention to it can get to it. But so this is great. I think we've alluded to a few technologies. Pete, you mentioned some. Qiana, you mentioned some. Howard, appreciate the shout outs to CareAcademy. For those of you who don't know, ClearCare was acquired by WellSky many years ago, and then they've now formally sort of rebranded themselves as part of WellSky. So if you who's WellSky, but you knew ClearCare, it's the same. So it's sort of an important point, I think, for folks to keep in mind. So let's switch gears a little bit. This has been a great conversation around de-officing, and I think we kicked off touch a nerve here in a few areas in a positive way with some questions as well. Let's switch over to maybe to the policy side of the equation. So we're in a moment, perhaps a moment unlike any before us, where the current administration is very focused on the issues of the care economy, all the way back to when President Biden was still candidate Biden, and he's working hard to sort of bring some of that agenda forward. Leaving all politics aside about how you feel about those kinds of aspects, it is clear that at the federal government level, there are conversations that are happening at a very high level about how to support caregivers differently, how to support the people delivering that care differently. There appears, we'll see how bills go, but there appears to be a lot of money heading this way. There's federal committees who are looking at all the different ways, and in a lot of ways, aspects of this feel very bipartisan. I mean, we're hearing from both both sides of the aisle, if you will, on some of these issues. So what do you want to see here from our federal government as it relates to some of the policy initiatives that are being discussed? Like, what would be let's double click on Medicaid reimbursement. Got it. Let's in addition, or as part of that, like what's the problem? Where do we think this is going to go, and how might this show up for us in 2022? And I'll start with you, Howard.
Well, I think a lot of good things are happening in that. I think the government and the general population sees the value in what we do, and that if you listen to what people are saying, I mean, because of the need of seniors, families are under stress, and they're torn between taking care of their parents and taking care of their kids. We have this. The pandemic certainly didn't help it, but we have this disease of loneliness, and all these things can be treated in a very efficient manner by expanding access to the services that we offer. And I think there's a general recognition that this is true, that there's an efficiency, that by spending a little bit of money here, they can save a lot of money elsewhere, in hospital admissions and all sorts of things. So that's happening. What I would suggest that we would tell a politician at any level, man, listen to what people are saying, and understand.
Yeah.
And if we're able to devise a way to ease that stress and that suffering, and we can do it in an efficient manner, and we can do it one-on-one in folks' homes, let's find a way to do that.
Yeah, no, it's good. Listen, but let's also listen and understand. I think the second part of that is actually maybe more important, because I know a lot of politicians who would tell you that they listen, but do they?
Well, yeah.
I like your second part of that.
I like nod my head, and it's got to connect. You're absolutely right, Aaron.
For sure. Well, Pete, I know you have an opinion on Medicaid. The floor is yours, my friend.
Well, I'll just speak for Georgia and maybe Southeast, but I think the issue we're facing is that the reimbursement rates are just abysmal, and so what it does is it causes us to make hard business decisions of, are we going to take a client where reimbursement rate is 60% of where we can get from either the VA or from a private pay. So I've had the opportunity to speak with our Congresswoman. I manage her Service Academy appointment panel or nomination panel for the service academies, and so I had an opportunity to speak with her, and it was around the infrastructure bill, and whether that, to your point, it's an apolitical statement I'm making, whether it comes or not. What I share with Congresswoman Bordeaux from our perspective is it's not one of supply of demand, is that we're turning away clients every day. It's about the supply of caregivers, and that generally the home care agencies cannot compete from a price performance with other areas in which they can get jobs. And so my view was to Congressman Bordeaux is, we all want to pay our caregivers more. And so what I'd like to see is from an appropriations and from a law perspective is let's pay more, but let's make sure that the reimbursement is consistent so we can run a logical business. Because what I shared with at the end was, my summation was, what you're seeing is really good and committed providers fleeing the Medicaid space. And so we've got to work on tools and capabilities of getting more folks trained, paying them at a logical rate so that they're enthused about this. And this year I joined voluntarily, but the Home Care Association of Georgia legislative panel, and we're really going to focus on going after the local politician. And one of the things that was impressed upon me is that our demographic, largely the senior population, they have the higher propensity to vote. And so our politicians would have a tendency to listen, but it's got to be both supply and demand. I think the demand side is there. We've got to get more caregivers, and it's not just picking and parsing from others. It's really increasing the available pool through tools, training, and improved compensation.
So how do you think the federal government can help?
Well, I think
with that part of it, with this increasing supply.
Yeah. So one of the things is making it more attractive to get folks who want to be in the industry, right? So we are. I won't speak in much specifics, but we're starting to gain success and traction with specific communities around the home care space and the advantages that that they can enjoy here. But I think where the government can help is it's really going to come down to dollars, Aaron, is that, will the government really commit, if human capital is being described as infrastructure, then let's put money behind it and let's pay an improved wage. I spoke with Congressman Bordeaux about hold us accountable. If we're going to be required to pay X and we can charge Y, let's put in some agreed to mechanism that will allow for that. But I think we're all on board with that. We talk about different constituents, or I do, about we serve. At the end of the day, they're all our fellow Americans who are in need of care, right? And so we shouldn't, frankly, have to distinguish based on their ability to pay, but that's the stark reality of the business we're in.
Yeah. What about for you, Qiana, in Texas? What are you seeing? Do you take Medicaid?
So we do not take Medicaid, and I have not done an actual survey, but I am pretty for certain that Texas probably reimburses the least for all of the states, just based on a spot check when we're talking with several other business owners in different states. It's really bad in Texas. So I don't take it at all.
Has that been an issue for you, do you think? Do you get calls where people say, hey, I'm a public pay, however they phrase it? I guess they probably wouldn't say that, but
so it's not an issue for me because I do private pay, but it is an issue for our seniors who really need these services. And it's an issue because like what I pay my caregivers is more than the reimbursement rates for Texas right now. And that's a shame. So we always get calls from little seniors and they're trying to switch to our agency because they had some caregiver that ripped them off, or I've heard of things that they sent a prostitute, or just all kind of really crazy stories of the type of people that some, not all, but some of the agencies in our area are hiring.
Yeah.
And so the seniors it's a disservice to them and they need the help. So many seniors need the help and they can't get quality workers because the reimbursements are so low.
Yeah. What about for you, Howard? Do you guys have a government relations team as part of Senior Helpers or Senior Helping Seniors, excuse me?
No, we don't, although we're active across the country with various state associations as well. That's another place where we really count on our partners to take the lead. I think Pete and Qiana have given me the opportunity to say my favorite business truism. Is this: without a margin, there is no mission. Right? We all want to take care of folks, but we need money to do that.
That's right. And
everybody's dealing with the same arithmetic. So yeah, it comes down to funding at a level where we can attract, train, and retain outstanding caregivers. And in the scope of things, and the scope of government spending, it can be done so efficiently.
Yeah. So let's charge the group. We have, a large audience here. Should everybody write their congressperson in the federal government, the state government? Like where should we point our, what's the one thing we can all do tomorrow to help here?
Yeah, I'll jump in there if I could, is I think the federal, all well and good, but all politics is local.
Right.
So, my immediate advice or guidance would be, understand who helps set rates at the state legislative level, what committee, who are the people on it, and can you gain access to them? And so that's where we've had, for Georgia Medicaid, we got a 10% reimbursement rate increase last year. We think this year we're probably going to be in the order of 3 to 5%, but the dialogue is improving. But it's local action with named people, named representatives at the local level who will make that final decision.
Yeah, Howard's nodding his head vigorously.
Yeah, I gotta give that a big amen, Pete. When we in the rollout plan for our new partners, meeting with your state rep is on that list.
Yeah,
and it's just it's a great place to get started. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with Pete's approach.
Qiana, anything to add there? Second.
I second. Yeah, everything that they're saying, I agree with. It just, there needs to be change.
Well, and it's interesting. I apologize. I don't remember which one of you said this, but seniors tend to vote at a higher rate than others, and look, politicians have one job: get reelected, and then everything else falls from there. So they certainly my experience and some of the engagements and conversations I've been having here and in prior world, like if you're active in the community and they see you as someone who has the voice of the community, they will listen. The understand part, different thing, but there is an opportunity there to create a dialogue and create a conversation, and it's kind of what you do with it. So I think that's great insights. I'd love to, I'm keeping an eye on the clock here. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit and just sort of talk about the general weariness we all have with COVID. I mentioned at the top, we're 2 years in, and it's sort of mind boggling as we start. But, if I could ask everybody to raise their hand and see it, I would. And then I asked you all who's tired, we'd all raise our hand and say we're tired. I personally, I can feel the concentric circles of COVID just getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Thankfully, knock wood, I haven't had to deal with it just yet. But so, are you guys feeling the same sense of fatigue? Are you feeling this within your community, within your caregiving community? And kind of how are we, as we move from one wave to the other, how are we dealing with this? I'll throw it open. Who wants to go first?
Certainly we're all fatigued, right? But I tend to try to take a longitudinal view, and I go back and say, how did we react when the first time we heard that a client or a caregiver was COVID positive? Mm-hmm. It was probably near panic, right? And we pull out the flow charts and what do we do? I then fast forward to this morning, caregiver reports she's COVID positive, and it's a much different response. It's here's the protocol, quarantine period, we do the contact. So I think it goes back to how we started the conversations. Now the fabric of how we just run the business. Yeah. So I think we're more business oriented, if that's probably not a right way to say it, but I think it's a frank fact of how we're managing each instance of COVID. Each has its own nuances. But, for example, with the recent legislation or the Supreme Court decisions, I should say, what we're seeing is for those Medicaid facilities where we are supplemental staff, we're coming under a set of requirements there. And so their testing requirements are more rigorous. So what we're doing is we're charging more from a staffing perspective. And then that delta, we just pass right on to the caregiver to make it feel for him or her that we do care about the environment they're going in. It's a little more rigorous. So we're trying where we can to take, those margin dollars and help the caregiver so that it becomes, I think, maybe a little bit better environment, if that makes sense. Still, the question, I'm not going to answer it right now. It's a big one for everybody, is the, mandating vaccines is still, it's a double-edged sword in this industry for us. And that, in terms of, there's pros and cons either way, but I think that we're more, we're no less passionate about how we're dealing with it, but I think it's become more the day-to-day fabric, and it's a more calm approach to what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. Qiana, how are you reacting? Are you seeing changes in behaviors, or people it's the same? It's I don't want to make any generalizations about any states, but how are things there for you, and how are you seeing things move forward?
Well, I like to say Texas is the Wild Wild West.
You live there. I didn't say it. You did.
And I live there. I thought everywhere was like this. And then I
Yeah.
went out of town and I realized like how closed in and strict other places were. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that's quite interesting. It's been an interesting ride in dealing with all of this. And you talk about the fatigue. Yeah, everybody's feeling it. The other thing that I've noticed is this is in general, not just home care, but just everybody. It seems like crime is up. There's a lot of like road rage. It's like a lot of people are dealing with a lot of things, during this pandemic, losing people that they love. So people are not overall in a good mindset. And so you see that in your employees, you see that with the caregivers, you see that with the clients, we see that with the families. So it really is a tough time on everyone.
Yeah, people are willing to say things to you that you would have no like, where did that come from? Like, why? What? Take it easy,
Yes.
Howard, how are you seeing your various franchises sort of deal with this fatigue, and how are you supporting them?
Yeah, much like Qiana and Pete, I mean, our folks are weary, but now they realize that this is a situation that's going to last for a while. I think as Pete said specifically, it's a business challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's a business challenge that has to be met and mastered. We were talking about vaccine mandates, and I think in a real way, there's a de facto mandate in that a caregiver who's not vaccinated is less welcome in homes. I mean, it's just the way it is. And so it really does come down to it comes down to transparency and communication and disclosure, and let people know what they're facing.
Yeah,
I think the saying is this: people may be people may be done with COVID, but COVID's not done with people. I mean,
that's for sure.
Right. I mean, so we're this is going to be with us for a while. It's a part of the fabric of the challenges that we face.
Yeah.
And keep talking to your people, keep communicating with your people. As Qiana said, man, their whole emotions are elevated. And so we have to be cognizant of that and understand that when we talk to folks.
Yeah. And sort of meet them where they're at, right?
Yeah.
It's in a different place. A question or comment here from Andrea, which I just want to amplify for folks, which she's like, I don't mandate the vaccine because all my clients do, and so then I don't have to be the bad guy.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Are we running into situations where we have clients who are not vaccinated but they want to have vaccinated caregivers? I mean, has that come up? Or okay, good. I see a shaking your head from Qiana. Pete.
No, I think the ones who require a vaccinated caregiver are vaccinated.
Yeah. And so, the Supreme Court ruling was a little muddy, right? So the OSHA rule was struck down, but the CMS rule was sort of upheld. Ish. So we carry forward in shade of gray. Is that what we're doing? Pete, what are you doing? I think you said you're not mandating it specifically, but
so from day one, we had a financial incentive for being vaccinated. We've been very proactive in communicating, and to this point, we've not mandated. And as I said, it's this double-edged sword, right? We've seen an influx of caregivers since the rulings came down, ones who are leaving facilities. But we continue to stress the importance of it. We educate, but we have not mandated at this point. And what we found, my assessment is financial incentives really were nice, but they didn't drive the needle. If someone's going to get vaccinated, they're going to get vaccinated. And so we now have a matching approach of, vaccinated caregiver, vaccinated client, and is, what we're doing. So it's more time for our scheduler to go through that process. But that's where we are right now. We have what we're thinking about right now is sort of a half step of only hiring vaccinated caregivers. So what that would do is then we know who the unvaccinated pool is and continue to work there. Our attorney is not fully on board with that strategy right now, so everything is fluid, right? In terms of how we're thinking about this, but it's one where we have not, nor do I know of any of our colleagues in our cohort who have mandated it at this point, and so that's where we stand.
So again, keeping an eye on the clock, but one last question that's sort of burbling up here in the chat is, I think that the availability of in-home, the rapid tests is really starting to unlock. Should have happened a year ago, sure, but here we are. We're in a moment now where the rapid testing, we were talking before this call, like, okay, we can now go to the government and get 4 sent to us sometime soon, we hope. I was able to actually pick up some at CVS. And there's a chat here about somebody who's willing to sort of, start to enable you. Does that change the calculus a little bit? Does that actually help by arming you with the ability to test, or does that just create more problems that you'd just rather not have to deal with?
So I was commenting, testing was more of an issue in the past with COVID than it is right now because of the vaccines. We had facilities that wanted us to test bi-weekly, weekly, and in some cases twice a week.
Yeah.
And so it was an issue, especially, it was only really an issue when the numbers went high, because then finding the testing facilities and getting the results were taking a long time. But we just had our caregivers in a system of going to like CVS and things like that to get tested. I bought some COVID tests and I had them on hand for emergencies. So right now it's not too much of an issue. However, we were able to get COVID tests from our local chamber. So I would definitely tell everybody to check with your chamber. They may be participating in a program with the government where they get COVID tests and they can distribute them out to their members. So, I mean, I got several COVID tests on hand now.
Yeah. Great. Howard, are you trying to drive anything system wide or just enable?
Listen, this is our approach from the beginning on the vaccines was encourage. I mean, right up to the point of mandating, and then the marketplace tends to take care of the rest. As far as the testing, I mean, the testing has been widely available for a while. It's now more convenient. I don't see it having a significant, impact. But I haven't been a great seer through this whole thing, so there's still a lot of road ahead and a lot of questions.
Yeah. There is a question from the audience here about what is a medical exemption, what's a qualified medical exemption, what's a qualified religious exemption, and on that one, I would defer to your counsel. I know we may all have opinions here, but I think that the best thing for each person to do is to sort of work with your counsel and understand kind of where your legal obligations start and end, and everything else is just opinion. So we probably all have opinions. Yeah, go ahead, Qiana.
Yeah, I was going to say that we spent probably a couple of $1,000s, unfortunately, trying to figure out the medical and religious exemption. And so it's very, very specific. Yep. It can open you up for a lot of liability. So you definitely want to talk to your counsel and do a lot of research to make sure you're in the clear. Yep. For anybody that is claiming a religious or medical exemption. Yeah,
it's a tricky one, and yes, it's a tricky one. Talk to your counsel. Wow, look at that. We are almost on our hour. Hard to believe that this is such a dynamic conversation that we've used the time up, and here we are. And I love all the questions. We're going to grab this dialogue and we're going to try to do something with that. There's a long thread in here about Medicaid reimbursement rates. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do with that, but we're going to do something with it and try to help you sort of navigate this, because it's clear that there's some opacity, some people aren't clear, like, okay, what's my rates versus what's your rates? And I understand that they're very dynamic right down to the zip code. So it's really hard to sort of try to get a generalization, and that's done deliberately. But there's something in here, and we're going to try to figure out how to enable that for you. But let's just do a quick round robin, kind of last words as people leave and sort of go back to their to work, if you will. And what's either the one thing that you wish for this year, or the one thing that you would ask people to do this year as they embark on their 2022 journey, whatever that looks like. So I'm going to start with you, Qiana.
Are you asking what do I wish for?
Yeah, what do you wish for?
I wish for COVID to go away.
Yeah, all right. What else do you wish for? That's not going to happen.
But I would just say, just to touch back to what I said earlier, people are not in a good frame of mind.
Yeah.
So we, as leaders of our organization and of our industry, we need to be very cognizant of that. We need to be patient with people. And in many times, I've had to just have one-off conversations with my caregivers, my staff, or employees. Hey, how you doing? Hey, tell me what's going on. Show empathy and be compassionate.
That's great. Empathy and compassion. Pete, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I certainly echo those comments, Qiana. I think my ask is that we stay enthused. And I share that because we're in a great space. Our investment thesis for coming in here has only been, frankly, enhanced with COVID. On a local level, we saw huge growth last year in our agency. I don't see it being abated this year. And I would just end with, there's a lot of smart money looking at this space. By that I mean, private equity is going to be funneling a boatload of money into remote patient monitoring technologies. Probably we're starting to hear more and more. Probably each of us is privy to one or two of those things. But my point is, stay enthused, because we're in a fantastic space of serving those in need. And I'll go back to a military axiom is, there's no substitute for boots on the ground. And what I mean by that is caregivers in the home. Yes, technology will be infused in this industry, but I don't think there's going to be any substitute in the near term for our precious caregivers, providing a wonderful service.
Enthused, stay enthused. That's your mantra. I like it. I'm going to give you the last word, Howard.
Thanks, Aaron. I guess I would put it this way. I not only work for Seniors Helping Seniors, I am a senior. So I give everybody on this call the same advice I give my peers. Keep moving, keep learning, and keep praying.
I like it. That's a great coda for the session today. So with that, I do want to thank the three of you deeply for your time and your engagement and your and all of your insights today. I'd like to thank everybody who attended. It's been a super interesting conversation and fascinating to me to try to watch the chat thread as we're going through this. Super helpful, super interesting. Like I said, we will send out a link and to the recording. So if you want to come back to it, we have captured all of your chat questions and also the questions that we weren't able to get to in the Q&A window. We'll address those and look for some additional content from us kind of around some of these issues. We have a blog, we have a podcast, and we have a bunch of other ways that we communicate with you. So, and if you're interested, feel free to start a free trial of CareAcademy today. So thank you all for your time, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Take care.